So we just defined social facilitation. And remember, once again, I'm always going to have this definition up here. And the idea here, once again, is that when the task is easy and other people are watching, we do really well. The task is really hard and other people are watching, we don't do as well. And so let's talk about this with humans. So we saw it with cockroaches, and now we're going to move on to humans. And I tried to find really interesting studies that went beyond just the simple 2x2. And what Greer did in '83 I thought was really neat. He looked at archival or observational data. So he never had anyone come into the lab or anything. Instead, what he did is he looked at two college basketball teams over the course of the, I believe it was the 1981 season. Don't quote me on that number. And what he did is he had people watch videotapes of these two college basketball teams play, and he recorded turnover rates, scoring, and fouls. So turnovers are, if you're not a basketball fan, turnovers is where you, you lose the ball, you throw it out of bounds, you turn the ball over to your opponent. So that's what turnover is. Scoring is scoring, and then fouls would be like hacking someone's arm, like hitting someone's arm when they go for a shot, or there are other, I'm not a basketball player, so there are other fouls too, but that's the most common one. And what he did was he wanted to assess these variables when the crowd was the crowd was either normal or booing. Normal meaning that, and I don't. These are the terms they use, so I'm going to use different terms. Normal just means they're quiet. Booing means they're loud, and I'll make that clear later as well. And then we also gauge whether they're home or away. Now, any sports fan would tell you that when that playing away is harder. So the way to think of it is like this is the easy task is home, and this is the difficult task is away. All right. And then to further complicate the matter, we have this normal or this booing. All right. And, it kind of looks like this. This is what people see when they shoot free throws is all this craziness. And the question is, does that matter? Right. So here's what they found. Let's just put all three of them up there so we can all see them together. So remember, so scoring, the higher the score, the better. All right. So as we saw, home is better than away. So what we see here is that this is higher. The whole red bar right here is higher than the blue bar. So we know that playing at home is easy. And remember, we're going to take out this word booing and we're just going to put loud. And so what's going to happen here is when the crowd is loud and you're home, you would think that they're cheering for you. So that's going to be right here. You're going to do a lot better. But when the crowd is loud and you're away, you can assume that they're booing or they're, making these like those signs that I just put up on the previous slide when you're shooting that free throw. And what you see is that it matters. The social facilitation effect does indeed happen. And we know that because of the increase here and the decrease here. All right. Now, we can also see that with foul rate and turnover rate. So fouls are bad, so the higher the score, that's bad. And what we see once again is that if you're a visitor and you're away, if you're a visitor, so you're an away team, look at the difference between a quiet versus a loud crowd. Your performance matters. It gets harder as you are a visitor, but it also gets harder as you are getting booed. And finally, over here, not a lot of actions going on over here, but let's look at this. Oh, it's supposed to be an arrow. Let's try that again. Let's look at this guy right here, where what we have is when you're home and they're cheering you, you make less turnovers, right? So in other words, if we're defining being a home team as being easy, then other people are helping us. And we see that throughout. And if you're defining being a visitor as being hard, other people there being loud, there you go. So there is no circumstance under which you have a sporting event where no one shows up. So they couldn't have a true control condition where there's no audience. But if you've ever played sports before, you will know that a lot of athletes are able to zone out the crowd. And that's why the crowd tries to get really, really loud. All right, so it does matter. It does matter. Now, we saw it in cockroaches. We now see it in humans in this data here. But what about personality? Does personality matter? And this was a neat study by Graydon and Murphy. And what they did is they had participants fill out an extroversion scale. So extroversion, this is a personality variable. You differ on it. the higher the score, the more you like being around people. The lower the score, the more you are introverted and you like being by yourself. And what people had to do is play ping pong. So basically, what they had to do in this task was they set up a ping pong table like this. So this is the net, right? And if you've ever played ping pong, what happens is the ping pong table is kind of divided like this. And if you're over here, their task was to hit the ping pong ball in this grid right here. All right, and the way it works is to play ping pong is when you serve it, it has to hit your side first, then it bounces over the net and gets here. And every time you got it in that little grid, you got a point. All right, so that's the game they played. That's the ping pong game. And basically, they were randomly assigned to do this in the presence of just a scorer, so just one person, or in 10 to 12 of their closest friends. All right. So, and the dependent variable is how many points they got in the game, how many times they hit the ping pong ball in that grid. All right. And here's what they found. So these are for extroverted people. These are for introverted people. This is the number of balls they hit in that grid. And what they found is this interesting interaction here. So you can graph the interaction. You see the lines are not parallel. And what we see is that personality influences your it interacts with the social facilitation idea, right? So let's think about what is an easy or hard task. So ping pong, this task is not that super difficult, right? I mean, it's probably not that difficult, right? It's not the hardest thing you've ever had to do. It probably takes a couple times to get used to it, then you go. But what makes this easy versus hard is that introverts, they don't like being around people. They feel very uncomfortable around people. And so when do they do better? They do better when there's no audience. But when there's other people watching, that becomes a really hard task. So the audience itself not only is an audience, but it also is difficult. It makes the task more difficult, and you do worse. Conversely, if you're an extroverted person, you love being around people. That's your jam, and you feel very uncomfortable if you're by yourself. And sure enough, we see the opposite effect over here, where they did better, right? They did a lot better when they had 10 to 12 of their friends watching versus if they were alone. And we see these cool things, and this suggests that your personality influences the social facilitation effect. All right? So one final study is, the question is, what about with kids? So we saw it with cockroaches. We saw it in the Greer study with adults, specifically athletes, humans. We saw it with adults, college kids, just normal kids, normal college students with their ping pong game. That's the Graydon and Murphy. And then finally, we have Gardner and Knowles, and they were looking at it with kids. All right, here's what they did. Participants were asked to indicate what their favorite TV character was. All right, and then they were randomly assigned to do a task, and they had to pretend that they were doing it with their favorite character watching them or not. All right, and the task they had to do was a copying task, and they had to copy like these words down, so that you would see a set of letters like this. All right, and you just had to copy it, and you would think that'd be easy, except for the fact that you had to do it with your dominant or non-dominant hand. So I'm going to show you what the dominant hand looks like. I'm going to Freeants. Easy, right? That took no time. But for the non-dominant hand, Freeants. It's harder and it takes longer. All right, it takes much longer to do. So therefore, the task over here, my dominant hand one, that's this one, was really easy, but this one was really, really hard. All right, and so that's what these kids had to do. And the question was, in a certain amount of time, they had, in 2 minutes specifically, how many words can you copy? And it's just easier to do that with your dominant versus your non-dominant hand. So this is the classic 2x2. We have the task difficulty, easy versus hard, and then we have the presence of your favorite character, someone you care about pleasing them, versus someone you don't really care about. And this is what the results show. First of all, definitely a main effect of difficulty. Look how high these easy bars are right here versus these hard bars. So, duh. However, we do see the interaction, right? We do see non-parallel lines. That's a terrible drawing of non-parallel lines. But basically what you see here is over here the dark blue bar is higher than the light blue bar, and here the light blue bar is higher than the dark. So opposite patterns, hence the interaction. I just wasn't drawing it well. And basically what's happening here is for these kids, when the task was easy and their favorite character was watching them, they did really well. But when the task was hard and their favorite character was watching them, they did poor compared to the control group here and here. Right? So you see those differences, and this is the classic social facilitation effect. So we found it with kids. It works with kids as well. All right. So why? Well, here's what Zion said. All right, what Zion said is we have other people watching us makes us aroused. And remember, when we talked about this in aggression, I said arousal is not a bad thing. All right, arousal is not a bad thing in certain doses. So let me give you, let's talk about something here called the Yerkes-Dodson law. What this law says is that your performance, that's on the y-axis, your performance on a task, and this is arousal on the x-axis, it looks like this. It's an inverted U, all right? So what Yerkes-Dodson law, what it says is that if you are super aroused, you're super aroused, you're sweaty, your heartbeat's going, you can't control it, you actually do very, very poorly at tests, very poorly. It could be a test. It could be any performance. You just do really, really bad because you're so anxious that you just break down and you can't do anything. However, if the task is, if arousal is really low, meaning like you don't care about it, you also do bad. Like there has to be some level of arousal for you to care. And if you're that low, it's like, I don't care. So then your performance is really bad. Optimal performance, the best performance is when you are aroused enough to care, but not so aroused that it like cripples you. And this is the Yerkes-Dodson law. So this Yerkes-Dodson law, what's going to happen here is it's very, very important for how we explain social facilitation. So I'm just going to draw the graph real quick up here like so. And let's go over what they said. Well, here's what Zion said, is that arousal. Why does other people cause us arousal? Well, number one is that it makes us alert. So what Zion was kind of pressured with was he had to figure out how to explain these cockroach effects, right? He had to figure that out because, what's going on there? And it has to, the cockroach effects, in order to make it applicable to us as humans, is it has to explain human effects as well. And that's not easy because you don't know what a cockroach is thinking. You can't give a cockroach a questionnaire. So what he argued was that others around make us alert. And that is why the cockroaches went faster when other people were watching them in the simple maze, and slower in the complex maze when the other cockroaches were watching. All right. Number two is something called evaluation apprehension. And this does not explain cockroaches, but when other people are around us, we feel like they're judging us. Right? Think of like the basketball players. Like you're judged on every shot and every pass and every rebound and free throw that you make, and that's a thing. Right, that is a thing. Evaluation apprehension is a thing. You feel like you're being judged, and sure enough, you better believe that's going to cause arousal. And finally, other people around us can distract us, and that's going to cause a certain level of arousal. And so here's what he said is going to happen. All right, so this is the theory in your book. Right, here's what's happening when other people are around, and you can be evaluated. That means you can be judged. What's going to happen is these three things are going to come into play. All right, those three things are going to come into play. So if your performance can be tied to your name, then you're going to be alert, you're going to maybe be distracted, and you're going to have evaluation apprehension. These three things are going to cause us to be aroused. And that arousal, when the task is easy, is really good. It's like if the task is really easy, and other people are watching, it takes us from here and maybe it puts us right here, which is where we want to be. But if the task is really hard, we're already going to be like right here because you're already aroused because the task is hard. And when other people are there, all this right here just adds to it. And then it puts us right here and we do really poorly. All right. So that's social facilitation in a nutshell. The last thing we have to talk about is social loafing, and we'll be done with this unit.